Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Off Angle. We're back for episode 14, of course. Been on a little bit of a hiatus over Christmas. Had some time off. You know how it rolls. But we are into 2023 and ready to get back into it. Pranogo and I, of course, being joined by a couple of guests who've been on a few times. Yumi down on the bottom right there. And, of course, Voo joining us from the bottom left. I was going to do some production type stuff. But as I've been putting it together and just rolling, it doesn't... It looks like shit, to be honest, because it just zooms in a bit too much, cutting away from Discord. Maybe in the future we'll add to it, but in the Lost episode of James Banks, he said this was pretty gangster, our setup, so I think we'll keep it like this. But for today, we've got 4 people. See how it goes. That's how we're spicing up the format a little bit. Maybe try and do this a bit more often, but if we end up just sort of shouting over each other by the end of the episode, then perhaps we'll go back down to 3. But you know how we roll. It's nice and casual. Michael, you look like you got something to...
I mean, we start increasing the numbers. Eventually, we'll end up on like the 17-man podcast, like Not Out Here.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out Not Out Here one time. Well, I missed them. There's a gap in the market for that many people on the podcast.
Did he start doing the podcast?
I think they're a little bit less frequent.
To be fair,
I haven't seen one in a while.
Yeah, fucking 17 people, especially in esports, like coordinating with 3 people is hard enough. But for the first podcast with 4 people, bringing me on has to be your worst fucking decision. I have to be the worst possible person to have on a 4-man podcast if you're testing the waters.
I mean, ultimately, not too fussed, to be fair, Voo. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have asked you on if I didn't want you on at the end of the day. But
I mean, if you're on a 2-man podcast, I'm the fucking bomb. All right, I'm like number 1. Okay, it's just the 4-man aspect seems to be a problem.
Yeah, well, you got a lot to say. You know what I mean? So it's all good. I don't mind. We'll see how long we roll. I think we're aiming for about 90 minutes, like we usually do. One thing to add before we get into what we're actually going to talk about, which is hopefully Counter-Strike this time, because it went a little bit off the rails the last time we had a live podcast. But we are live over on Semi Pranogo all the time. I don't think we've really mentioned that. It's down in the description, everything. I've actually managed to get an Anchor set up as well. A few people were asking for audio format, so it's available on Anchor, available on Spotify. Very cool. Gonna go back over the next few weeks or whatever and just re-record those older episodes in audio only. If perhaps this is your first episode that you get involved in, you want to go back and check them out in audio format, all available for you there. But yeah, I guess where I want to start, and I think a good place to start with where we're recording on the 28th of January, we are a little bit into Blast, so I think talking about stories that relate most to that, and the way that that's going down at the minute, it falls at a bit of a weird time. Comes before Pro League. I think a lot of people are just waiting Pro League out. We've also got Katowice coming in just a few days, right? So it feels like this falls in a very strange part of the calendar, right? Where it's kind of a warm-up event. You don't necessarily have to watch it, and maybe even the teams are saving strats. I guess we could kick off there, to be honest. I don't know if you guys have caught all the games, all the results. They also fall at relatively weird times in the day. But there's a few, Liquid looking pretty disappointing. We had EG early on with a crazy nearly comeback against Heroic. What kind of games have you boys caught, and anything that stands out as a storyline so far?
Probably the biggest storyline that I've noticed about Blast so far is that actually the teams themselves, like you were alluding to, Scriv, like Navi themselves coming out and saying this is just a warm-up tournament. Like, having that
was the
played,
most copium fucking comment I've ever heard in my life. Shut the fuck up. That was like Simple, when Simple was like, actually, Navi only won because I sent them pistol strats. That was that was some fucking cope if I've ever seen it. This just
Please don't boo me, Brazilian crowd. Please don't boo me.
Like, I understand it kind of is the warm-up event, but it's like, it's a warm-up event for everyone. I guarantee there's like 2 teams in the whole event that were like, we're gonna practice really fucking hard for this. Like, nobody, okay? Fuck. Podcast.
Hey, listen, it's past the 60-second rule that I'm sure you're very familiar with now, Voo. You can't have any profanity in the 60-second rule, which is good also that we're cutting the beginning, because then we don't have the word taint in there either.
But now we do, so I don't know.
Yeah,
it could mean anything, actually. It could mean anything. So
the taint upon esports.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
I don't think that'll be auto filtered out. I just think as well, like the format of Blast, as much as like the production is all great, like you've got all these partner teams. It's nothing we haven't said before, but the format is very forgiving for these partner teams to basically like go, oh well, you didn't make it through into the spring finals. Well, you're gonna go to the showdown instead, where you face like small region teams that basically have no chance to beat you. Like there is a chance, there's always a chance, but they almost consistently never get enough practice or the right type of practice to ever go against like the team that you're going to get. Also, they barely know which team they're going to face until like I think 3 or 4 days before the event, basically. So even if you were an underdog team, that's not enough time to prepare like a whole dossier on your side of the bracket. So it is just a little silly. The only teams I do think were quite serious were probably like EG and maybe Big. You know, I feel like they've got stuff to prove. But everybody else, yeah, it probably is just a buffer event because they know they've got other chances, even if they fail here.
Well, not Astralis, because they will not be at Katowice. Remember, there was this whole shebang that came out where they couldn't make any of the invites because of some Cash Cup victory, which is that's a whole saga. If you guys are interested in that silliness, you can go look it up on your own. But they probably Astralis themselves, even though they fell victim to that policy, probably also still don't exactly understand how that works because the ESL world ranking is, in a word, shit. But I will say that when we get into this territory of looking at these teams and these specific matchups and the results, the first thing that comes to my mind is that, like, eventually a lot of the favorites won. Today, actually, we saw Astralis shock an understrength NIP. Obviously, we'll get into NIP later on in the episode, I think, because this team can't catch a break, but it couldn't have happened to a better org, in my opinion. So, we'll see how that shakes up. Obviously, a lot of news to cover with that roster and that organization, but Astralis, with the exception of this win over NIP, I think in general a lot of the results have gone the way that we would have expected. There is the really shocking output that Liquid had against Big, but I don't know about you guys. I've felt for a little bit now that Liquid are just a little like fool's gold investment kind of thing, or maybe a more apt term these days would be a crypto investment. You're just waiting for them to go bust. So I don't know what you guys think about Liquid, but for me, I'm not surprised that they lost to Big. I am kind of surprised they lost in such an embarrassing fashion where they only won 10 rounds from memory. So that's pretty shocking. But beyond that, it's just like, okay, well, here's Liquid and there they go. See you later. I'm not expecting them to do too much damage this year, personally.
Yeah, I don't know. I had kind of high hopes for this team moving into the tail end of last year, but after the major, they've really fallen off. We didn't talk about it too much, but the Blast Fall final as well, they lost to OG there. So, like, I don't know. They've just really disappointed, and Yukindar, I think, may have grabbed the bag kind of thing. I don't know how many other teams were after him at the time, but he seems to be sort of the only standout. They're still struggling AWP-wise. It's not really working with OC for my money, and even Yukindar looking a bit dejected and just out of it these past few series. The one against Big, I'm just looking at it here. He absolutely binned it. So yeah, I was kind of behind them. I put them in all the pick'ems and all that good stuff relatively far into the major. Expected maybe like a top 4 out of them, and since then they've just been on like this downward trajectory. So I don't know. I think Nitro as an IGL not really rated, and I think that OC, especially on the AWP, is really costing them. So the whole story around Liquid, a little bit of hype, but I don't know. I think some of these players, and particularly the core of this team, is sort of past it, and I would advise they go more international, especially like the AWPing is the glaring issue that you just kind of pick up an AWPer from a tier 2 in the same way Complexity have, and just hope that they can perform at a top kind of level, pick them up cheap from, somewhere in the middle of the pack in the EU teams, to be honest. But
well, what I said before, I think I remember mentioning, is the fact that Yukindar came into this team and it's Yukindar's team. He's the only one out of the lot of them that made it into the HLTV top 20, which I guess we'll talk about more later. But the fact that it felt like there had been some sort of coup d'etat within the camp, because it was Elige's team, it had been Naf's team for a long time, and now suddenly Yukindar comes in, he's there for a 6-month period, and now everybody's hyped up on him and only him. I feel like the culture is definitely going to have to shift in Liquid, and it probably already has. Maybe that's why they come into this year so different to what the expectations were for last year. I mean, we have to then temper our expectations back down to where they need to be, because if Elige continues performing like this as well, when he was a world-class player, I think most people would say going into 2021, to have him not have the greatest amount of output at big events in the past couple it's kind of shocking. You know, it's strange to see how Elige has fallen from grace effectively, and you know you'd have to tie that in correlation to Yakindar's entry into the team.
Vu, I'm going to ask you a very specific question. Do you think that Liquid even know how to make an opera work?
Fuck, like, man, listen, okay, listen, understand here that OC dominated tier 2 NA to like a comical level. He was like
Yes.
the simple of tier 2 NA. And not only that, but like he played like pretty smart. Like it was pretty obvious that Junior wasn't gonna, I mean, obvious in hindsight. It felt like when he first moved, I didn't think Junior was gonna do all that well, potentially, because he just missed a lot of shots. He took very aggressive duels, missed, and then he would unpeak and repeak. And at tier 1, it's a lot harder to do that. OC just wasn't missing easy shots. He was like in pretty good positions. He wasn't hyper aggressive, but he wasn't like, he was like moderately aggressive, kind of what you expect from a good opper in tier 1. He took the plays that he needed to make and always hit the fucking shots. And the fact that he can't succeed at the tier 1 level is a massive fucking, that's a massive red mark on like any future that NA has. I mean,
Yes.
like I don't even know what to say. Like he's just not up to what he should be. And I don't put it on Liquid. Like I haven't studied this directly, but it doesn't seem like it's Liquid's fault. It's just not there. I don't even know why. And then you combine that Yakindar seems to have changed. Like, I guess he's maybe in the mid round calling a little bit more is causing the decrease in fragging. I also kind of feel like the way Yakindar plays with Liquid, it's like when you don't have like a lot of threats, I feel like Yakindar can get focused a little bit and then become a bit of a like kind of get countered. And then you add on that they're adding in Anubis.
Yeah.
And Liquid's one of the teams that, because I went through and looked for Anubis games to watch. Not
Mm.
a lot of teams played Anubis at this event, but Liquid played it like 2 or 3 times. And maybe that's just not working for them, or maybe they've spent a lot of time on that. So that could be a factor as well.
Seems a bit random at the minute, Anubis. I don't know. It's still obviously very, very early on, but it's like wildly T-sided. It feels like a bomb site, sort of indefensible. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to figure out there, and it's very different from being like a Vertigo or an Ancient Merchant back in the day, because I think there's a lot more to work out. There's just so much unused space on Anubis, not to like go through that map. But yeah, I don't know. The problem with Liquid, I think, I do have to feel it's got to come down to more of like what's going on in the core, in the energy of the team. We know that in the past, you know, Elige has been a bit difficult to play with. I always talk about the intangibles when it comes to this kind of thing, but I think that they need a big shift, whether that's in like direction, bring in a different in-game leader. But I do think like the AWPing's sort of the obvious one that stands out. And I think that until they kind of change that, they're just not going to be able to compete and have someone like Yakindar. But it's a really good point that you bring up. Someone like Yakindar always had this like inimitable style, I think. And when he's on a team like Outsiders, I think that, yeah, there is a bit more, like Jame is something to worry about, and then also the style of Outsiders is very different, whereas now in Liquid, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit, Vu, that if you can probably deal with Nitro and OC because you're a top-level team and they just don't really pose many threats, and then Yakindar can just get shut down easily. So I honestly think that, you know, they just need a big firepower switch up around him to make it work, because it just isn't working, and even he now is not working, is the scary thing.
Well, it's like we used to talk about Furia and their conditions for fulfilling around 4 versus 5, because Art would very frequently do his own thing, you know, once upon a time. That was the Furia MO. It almost feels like Liquid are kind of falling in line with that, where sometimes Yakindar is going to do his thing and it'll work. Sometimes they'll win rounds, but they almost don't have that fallback factor, I think is what we're effectively trying to get at. The fact that they haven't conditioned themselves to win those rounds 4 versus 5. There's something missing in terms of how they rebuild the rounds, because they have the right amount of intelligence on that team to make it work. You know, talked about OC as like a smarter AWPer. I think Naf and Elige definitely have a good amount of game intelligence. You know, Nitro, I don't have a lot of kind words to say about where Nitro's head is at in terms of like his in-game leading, but I will say like if you need him to fulfill a role, he will most certainly do it. So I feel like they have the pieces necessary to make it work. It's just simply they may not realize it themselves that they need this backup plan yet.
It's been a long time for this roster to develop with no
Yeah.
backup plan to develop with it. You know what I mean? So that's the only that's probably the main thing that I'm looking at and just feeling confused by. The other thing too is that we were having a laugh about Shroud before we started this, and I've like Nitro isn't Shroud levels of washed necessarily at the end of his career, or maybe he is. It might be comparable, even though Nitro never got to the same heights. But like at this point, I just feel like maybe NA is still dining out on past successes. You know what I mean? Like this roster isn't that different from a lot of the big names of the heydays back in when NA was, you know, challenging. I had two teams in the top 5 when we remember the Liquid and NRG/EG when they first made the acquisition. Like this isn't that different from those heavy hitters. They're in different roles or different looks or a different congregation of talent, but like at the end of the day, really the only thing that's changed is, you know, OC and YouM3. So when you look at it from that lens, it's like, well, do you really expect that these pieces can still deliver, or do they need more of a push? And I just feel like if there was any other NA in-game leader, you would have surely started to audit him by now as a replacement for Nitro. Or maybe not though, because all those players really buy into him and really like having him on the team and really think he's a great guy and he's real buddy rubbing shoulders. But from an outside looking in, I just don't understand how he could. I don't predict he could have much more tenure with the team. Whether that prediction will be borne out entirely depends on the dynamics, and it does seem like Elige and company really are big fans of him. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe YouM3 can be the X factor that says, actually, guys, we really need to get this piece out and for a better one, because he doesn't have the same level of attachment. But then I would worry about his longevity, and like there's all these like intangibles and rumors and shit for a lot of these players. So I don't know, man. That's a rough
He's like
one.
Jax, but he calls.
Yeah, a little.
Well,
yeah.
I think that like Liquid, it's gonna sound weird because Liquid's, I guess, not one of the best teams of all time, like 2019 Liquid. But it's kind of almost going through like something you see with like the GOAT teams like NIP and Fnatic, where like especially with Fnatic when they split up into Fnatic and Godsent,
yep.
and then they're like, oh shit, like actually losing sucks. Let's bring back our team and like let's try and like make it work again. And you're always trying to like recapture the same
Yeah,
brilliance you used to have. That's what I felt like when they picked Nitro back up. Like it really did not seem to make a lot of sense at the time, and it still doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm gonna be honest, like love Nitro. I don't think he was ever a great IGL. It sounds like I'm saying he's a bad IGL. I don't think he's a bad IGL. He's a competent IGL. But I think that the fact that they could not beat Astralis by any means fucking necessary at all suggests that maybe Nitro wasn't the best IGL of all time, and it was simply the fact that they just domed everybody instantly around every corner, that they were winning series. But they brought him back, probably trying to relive the glory years, a la fucking Fnatic and Nib. And I genuinely never thought he was that good of an IGL to begin with. I mean, if you watch their series against Astralis, there was like clearly some glaring flaws. Like the series, there lots of series against Astralis in 2019. There was clearly some glaring flaws, and I've hoped that Daps could make a big difference. That's my main hope for Nitro maybe working, is that Daps could be super useful. But it seems like Daps works really well with like younger players that he can kind of mold, as opposed to like the more experienced players. So it's kind of hard to say. But yeah, Liquid definitely needs some big changes, but I'm not sure if those changes, like maybe you have players like maybe Elige or Naf are kind of stuck in the old mold as well and they're not adapting. It's really hard to say. I'm not sure. Whoever said it, something about a change in kind of like direction of the team. I think that's like absolutely what needs to happen. However it happens, I feel like they're kind of stuck in not the greatest place. I mean, they're trying, but I feel like they're still reliving the glory years, to be honest.
I mean, I think it's just so hard for a team to come up with a new direction when there are so few in-game leaders that seem marketable outside of like. I mean, even in the North American space, but even like European in-game leaders, and whether or not you can bring them over. Like I don't think anybody saw the EG Nealon move coming, but that
Yeah, right.
that was definitely more left field because they didn't want to pitch high prices for the, I guess, the more more reputable like Alexi B and I think Alex at the time, who were definitely going to cost a lot more, and
Yeah.
also couldn't guarantee that your team would succeed because they just didn't have the results to back that up in their previous rosters. So it's a weird time for teams to try and change philosophies unless you're just going to try and mold a current in-game leader or somebody that's not really an in-game leader into one that is going to have a change in mindset, which is difficult, man. Like,
You know what's really
to be
sad
fair,
is
if anyone could do it, Daps could do it. But
yeah, I actually put a lot of stock in Daps as a coach, but I do think that
I think his playing
if
days
it's
are
if
kind
it's
of
true
over.
what you say, right, Vu, that he's mostly gonna have a lot of affinity with younger players that need direction and can or
well,
will
that just
listen to the
seems like what
direction,
it's
right?
been. It's like
Right.
we can't say for sure, but
Right. And I think it's a fair like hypothesis to start to form. And if that ends up being true, like he's not going to get anything close to that sort of environment and Liquid, which is mostly veteran players who again, like they seem to just be a little bit delusional about what is required for success. I mean, my sort of final point on Liquid and NA as a whole, perhaps, although I guess we'll cover EG very briefly later. But the like Liquid feels like on the one hand, especially their recent form, but even their form at Abu Dhabi, like didn't seem like it would last. You know what I mean? And they also got like a really easy semifinal matchup, which that exact matchup against OG, they lost in this event. And obviously went on to lose against Big very embarrassingly. Like in this event and just in general, this is like the backdrop that you can now soak in Alicia's interview, where the headline is like the goal is to win a major. Like that is our goal. And it's like, okay, well, I'm sure a lot of players have that as like a goal on, you know, and they think about that and like that's what they really want to do. But to seriously contend for it and to take yourself seriously in that contending phase is to require a certain amount of output and results that Liquid just don't have. And that's sort of what I mean when I say that it feels like they're delusional or they're, you know, just like in their own head about like like their perception of reality doesn't match the fans, doesn't match the analysts, doesn't match the actual games going on. And I just don't think that this Liquid will compete for any sort of major championship or even like a tier 1 trophy at a LAN or anything. I don't think they're going to show us much of anything. Now, maybe I'm surprised and they get to a quarterfinal or semifinal finish like at this Katowice, and that would be a positive trend we could point to at an event that isn't maybe a bit more of an afterthought for most people, like the World Final was for Blast. But like in this particular case, man, like even against teams that aren't putting their all in at this event, they are not working very well at this Blast groups. Like they're not looking very good against opponents that surely, like, I know Big is a formidable team insofar as they're tactical and they have like protocols and you have to actually prepare for them, but you should still be able to dust off more than 10 rounds across 2 maps. You know what I mean? Like that's just silly. I don't know how they could have collapsed that egregiously. And that feels to me like it's a step too far for me to think that they can challenge for a major, which is what Elige purports to want to do. So I don't know, man. That's a funny comment in after, you know, the games have settled down and you see how badly they played, but at the same time, it doesn't bode well. Like I'm not putting any stock into these guys for winning winning Paris or winning whatever the second major is. It's just not going to happen.
I think that pretty much sums it up, to be honest with you. Like the Liquid squad. I just wanted to add very quickly that it may also be kind of a symptom of partner teams in a way that they don't want to take any big risks with their moves, and you know, because if they start doing that, and especially money, I think that they need to. I don't know whether it's just like a direct change within the team that they already have, but whatever they're doing just isn't working.
Listen, Script, Liquid and EG are doling out incredible amounts of money every month to pay these players.
That's true.
Like they
that
could,
is very
the
true,
money
actually.
is definitely not an issue. Now, like obviously it was pointed out earlier that like Nealon's move probably means that they didn't want to open the checkbooks too much. But we saw, I mean, if you can trust Smoothia with anything, you can trust him to leak players' salaries on HLTV Confirmed. And that's exactly what happened with Cirque and I think with Breeze as well. And it's just like for the performances, especially that Cirque, but in general that these players are putting up, like suddenly, I mean, I do wish this was just public knowledge in general, because that would, I think, like be a natural sanity check for everybody who is looking at that, right? I don't really see any downsides beyond like the player has to further insulate themselves from being, you know, called out for poor performances by fans who are aware of how much salary they're being paid. But like in general, I just look at that and I think that would be better for the management as well, because now like, okay, I'm paying you 30 grand, right? And like the most of the players who are outperforming you have like a tenth of that or a third of that or whatever. And it's like, Yeah, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do that, right? So anyway, that's just like a small aside, but it's just ridiculous that the money that these people are paying. Like
Um,
Liquid is not shy about spending money.
I mean, you could compare this to what everybody's been talking about in the football world, Ronaldo to the Saudi Arabian
Mm.
League, and how he hasn't. I don't think he's scored. I think he's played like 2 games. He hasn't scored in a league that he's supposed to basically just farm, and he's
Right.
made a ridiculous amount of money from it as well. People, and that's public information that we have to color how these players are doing, or like some of the greats within our sport. So yeah, I think it's. I mean, Cloud9 got clowned for it, but that was always the intention, I think, for them, was that they wanted to try and change the space. It just, it was a bad social experiment, apparently.
Yeah, I feel like if they
needed
were
other
more
people
public,
to do it, right?
right? I feel
Right.
like if they were more public, there'd probably be quite a few unhappy community members. You know what I mean? I think actually that
For sure.
wages at the minute are probably a bit high. That's sort of where I think it's the chatter in league or whatever is that things are getting a bit too high and they feel like maybe across the
they've been
board.
ridiculous.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of the esports industry's got to be affected by that. So that's probably part of it. Is just that the backlash that you'd get from that kind of thing would be pretty insane. Cool. I wanted to move on to Nip and chat about them.
Okay.
They have gotten kind of unlucky with where Hampus and his situation. We don't rightly know why, but he's on a leave of absence semi-permanently at the moment, but maybe for the long term. So once again, Nip plagued by roster issues. All the same, there's not a lot that feels that different. If Rez plays well, they win. If Rez doesn't play well, they lose. So yeah, not much has really changed for the side of NIP, in my opinion, and they're sort of our most recent game as well, just going down to Astralis a couple hours ago. So, that's kind of a surprise as well. Astralis finally able to win something, I guess. But yeah, it's all a bit strange. I think the first game they did play that with Hampus. He binned out, and then they've got this Maxter guy who, I'll be honest, I am very unfamiliar with. I've never really, I think he playing in Young Ninjas he is at the moment, but he's a very, very new addition to the CS space in general. And yeah, they've been biting it the past few days for sure. NIP, I think, again, another big money roster that is continuing to disappoint. They really do not look good, to be honest. They beat out on big, but it seems like everyone's beating out on big at the moment. So Nip, I don't know, right? Like, they're still trying to work this AWPing thing. They've gone to more of an international roster. Brolin left Fnatic because that was an issue for him.
Yeah.
So, now they're assumedly reported, communicating is the word I'm looking for in English, which, again, just goes against him. And I think that this is another sort of disappointing looking team taking a risk on head trick, and none of it's really paying off. Where do we sit on NIP?
Well, taking a
Okay.
risk on config too, as well. So.
Well, they have now.
Well,
Yeah, we can add that in.
Yeah. Hold on, they're replacing Hampus with config, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
In the longer term, but that won't come into effect until Kato, I think.
Yeah,
And
they're
then-
giving
just-
Hampus
I
a
was-
space.
I want to say I'm a little bit annoyed about their messaging around the Hampus thing, because everyone was like ready to accept whatever with Hampus, and it was like, okay, maybe someone died, maybe he's got like, fucking, maybe something's really gone wrong, and then just the way they came out about the thing with Hampus, they all but said exactly what the problem was.
Yeah.
Basically kind of low-key leaking exactly what was happening, when they could have just kept it behind closed doors and like not said shit, and everyone would have accepted it.
Yeah, they could have just said personal reasons, and I mean they did say that, but they also said about 18 other things.
Yeah,
as
they
you're
were like,
saying.
yeah, we went to see the performance coach and his
Yeah.
girlfriend and his girlfriend's dog that's a therapy dog, and then they realized that he needed a little bit of time off for like no reason specifically, but the therapy dog was really helpful in this interview. Like, you could not have been more transparent without saying exactly what the situation was.
Yeah,
It's just a
medical
little bit
professionals, bro. Come on.
It's just like, yeah, if they had just been like, he went to see the doctor, a doctor and him agreed that he needed some time off to reset, like, and then it's like, okay, all right, done. You have no idea what it could be. It could be anything, but they like low key leaked it. It was just so fucking ridiculous. I mean, NIP, like, I know, not Scrib, Pronogo just said near the start that it couldn't have happened to a better org. To be fair, Nip and Astralis, when they played, listen,
Yep.
there's not a lot of, there's no teams that I want to lose other than Astralis to begin with. Astralis has been, I want them to lose since 2020. Nip's been getting added on, especially
Yep.
because they never got any real backlash for the whole nothing in PayPal thing.
Yep.
Okay. And EG's been added on. We'll talk about that later. EG is a very recent addition, okay? But
Yep, yeah.
I don't want to be a salty person. I'm trying to be more positive actively. I'm trying my best. But these teams, man, they just make it so hard for me not to want them to lose, okay? It's really tough.
Yeah, of course. It's not just the nothing in PayPal for Nip, but then they obviously had the 100% loss on Mirage versus Anonymous
yeah.
Flashpoint, and the way that they handled that was like, like making a public tweet about how like everything was kosher after like game 1 or something, and then went on to contradict that by saying like, oh, it was all actually horrible forever, and like all this shit, right? And so like there's loads of stuff that like goes from not paying players, obviously the sticker money stuff for the capsules in 2020.
How did they not get more shit for that? That one was gone. Nobody everyone forgot about that in like days.
It's probably because they must have done something with the players, either like paid them off for silence, like bought their silence, or I don't know, maybe they just threatened legal action or something. Like for all I know, I don't know anything behind the scenes, to be clear, but like if we saw from like the Twists phase config shit, which maybe we'll even have time to get to, I don't know, but it's kind of more in the past now, that at that point, like we saw, people would just be like, oh, Twist says this, I like Twist, therefore he must be right, or whatever. And then like they paid no mind to like any of the other rules or any of the other things that you have to go through and to make it a fair play for everybody involved. So like the teams really are beholden to the players, especially in the court of public opinion. And if the players themselves had done anything to say, hey, yeah, where's my money? NIP stealing money from players, like at that point it's just over, right? Like the whole community goes against them. They probably have to retract something or like make some public statement, but instead they just ignored it. Somehow they were able to ignore it, and I think that's probably because no player even said anything, right?
And that's the thing, like the director of comms from Astralis probably could have learned a thing or two from NIP in terms of just being quiet and allowing things to sort of blow over in that regard. But sometimes they just feel like they have to clap back, don't they?
Yeah. Not a good Twitter thread, that one, to be fair.
No, a fun one though. It was definitely very, very interesting to see where people's heads were at. Like
you call my org shit. Well, I have stories about you that I would never leak.
I would also wait. Checking note. Yeah. Oh shit! I don't have. There's nothing here actually.
Yeah. Source trust.
Wait, so you play my trump card? It's empty. It's nothing.
Oh well.
Yeah, it's just shit, man. Like these orcs just have no idea. Like they clearly do not know what's going on. I mean, I'm actually kind of surprised that NIP didn't get more shit from. Well, I guess I'm not, considering everything we've said up until this point and how they didn't really get much of a backlash, besides maybe a little bit in the moment, and then everybody forgot. Like the fact that they floated on the Chinese stock market as well, and like the whole messaging around that, people may not remember. Device was announced, and then like their CEO or COO or whoever was like, and wait till you hear the next bit of news. It's even better. And then it's just Nip floats on the Chinese stock market. It's like, what the fuck? How does that have anything on Device being added to your roster, bro? Way to devalue your own player who just joined with your public messaging. It's just, this org is wild, man. So it was kind of funny to see Device go up against Nip. But honestly, there was another thing where somebody had, I think it was somebody who posted it to Reddit, or maybe I saw a tweet, but it was apparently only Rez is actually surviving from that Nip lineup because Hampus is on leave. So like only Rez is a ex-teammate of Device in this particular matchup, which is wild because he just left, it feels like. But
yeah, that's very true. I don't know. It's
how long ago Device played.
Yeah. I guess he looks pretty good, to be fair. We can kind of talk about that because, like I say, the newest matchup that we have is Astralis NIP, right? So that's the sort of newest result that we can go off. Orgs aside, config aside, and all that kind of stuff. How do we feel about the way the team is performing at this point? Because I think NIP still underperforming pretty heavily, and it's actually a really good point that you inadvertently raised there, Pronogo, that the roster that they've moved away from, yes, Device was a bit, but even without Device, even without a proper AWPer, I feel like they were showcasing a bit more potential than they are at the moment. They lose out to Astralis 2-1, and it ultimately isn't close on the two maps that they lose. So, you know, it just feels like this NIP team is doomed to failure at this point. And I don't know, Alexi B, man. I think we've put him through the ringer plenty of times now, and for me, he's not really found much success since that Ent squad at Cato 2019. To be honest with you, you know, G2 didn't work, OG didn't work even before that, and now NIP's not really working.
Yeah, OG make the major after getting rid of Alexi B. Funny that actually.
Yeah, it's a sad one. It's a sad one, to be honest. But if I kind of want to flip onto Astralis, maybe with Device in here. He feels pretty strong, actually. You know, we had a couple of these online games where he was looking sick, and everyone's like, whoa, Device is back. He does this thing where he drops smokes or whatever, so you can do outside smokes. He's got a lineup for the smoke dropping, even. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah, as nerdy as possible.
Everyone got really excited. It must mean Device is back. But I don't know. I think that Zip's playing a little better. You know, they do have this guy Buzz, who I think is getting better. Yeah, he's all right.
Had it rough. He's actually had a pretty rough tournament.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You know what? The treatment of
praises,
Buzz.
But yeah,
listen, the treatment of Buzz reminds me of the treatment of Lucky, but it's like even to a worse degree because like with Lucky, Glaive is like, actually I'll op, and then with Buzz, he's like, I think Maniac made the point on the desk, which is not a desk by the way. They just fucking stand there. Don't ask me why. But he's, so not on the not desk, on the standing not desk. Maniac made the point that apparently like they were just using him as a, he's like, they removed the riot shield, but here's Buzz being the fucking shield as he just walks in front of all the players to like absorb bullets or whatever. It's just massively baiting for the rest of his team. I mean, whatever, like, I don't know, that's something that you usually do when your coach is standing in, not when you actually have a up and coming player that you really believe in for the roster. But I mean, Astralis has been like worse than NIP in that respect. Not worse in the sense that like NIP has had way more roster instability where they have to like come in with a sub or, you know, bring up, they're just deciding apropos of nothing to like swap out, you know, ZTR for, or whatever. I forget what the other guy's name is, but he was also 3 letters. Does anybody know? Does anybody even remember? He's probably long gone by now. Dead now, of course. Like,
LNZ.
Yeah, there you go.
Linus.
Yeah. Yeah, what was that? You know, this is another mad tangent, but Linus, LNZ, had a mad like thing where he was like, yeah, actually, I prefer people call me LNZ when I'm just playing, but if I'm in the clutch, it would be really cool if you guys could scream my first name, Linus, just Linus. Oh my God, he's got the clutch. That would be really cool, and I think that would be really awesome. Like, fuck up, dude. Just change your fucking name if you want us to call it that. What are you doing?
There is a lot of that. I'm very sad that we don't get Nipple, you know, NPL.
Yeah, what the hell? Why do you say? I'm calling him Nipple. I'm not. I refuse. Your name was Nipple.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
once a nipple, always a nipple.
I suppose so. Yeah, it's just going to be one of them. Hard, you know, get the highlight reel of mispronounced on the cast, getting told off for saying nipple instead of NPL, because nipple rolls better than NPL, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, all of these like awkward, like say 3 letters back to back. Sometimes they can be okay, but for the most part, it's just like, really, I have to do this now. I have to read off alphabet letters just for you because you couldn't come up with an actual name. Like, I mean, JKS, I guess I've kind of grandfathered in, but JKS is even more silly because it's like his initials or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, your last name is Savage. You couldn't have done something with that, maybe? I don't know, man. I don't know.
There was already another player called Savage in the scene, so he just, you know,
True.
He decided to be respectful.
Savager. More savage.
The most.
All right, now for the fun one. EG. Any EG fans in the chat?
Yes. Voo has to tell us why EG has joined. I think I already know, and we did have Kassad on earlier, so we kind of already know.
Yeah,
what's your angle? Why is EG the now top 3 hated teams?
They have hired someone for like their performance thing. The first thing they did was call, like, say I've had 2 Kassad, he's Serbian, right? Like, I would like basically insult him for being a white male, just like, but in more words and in a much more annoying and worse way. And and then the new one was they beat Heroic, and it was like, listen, I had this once, okay, when I was like, when I casted some collegiate CS, okay? I casted some collegiate CS. We were a little overly negative about the skill level because, spoiler, the teams were fucking dog shit, okay? And the players They tried to give us casting advice. They went, I just prefer if the casters, instead of being negative about the team that's losing, why don't they just be positive about the team that's winning? As if that's not like a fucking concept that anyone understands. That's basically what was said. It was, what they, oh fuck, I can't even, oh, it was so dumb and fucking bad. And it was, and then she goes, instead of getting defensive, why don't you just admit that there's room for improvement? The casters were overly negative instead of giving fucking credit to EG from going from 217th to beating the best team in the world because we built a pipeline. I cannot fucking imagine a more fucking unlikable human being. Literally makes their team, I don't want EG to win. Literally, because of this, I have no fucking interest in EG winning because this person will just be fucking insufferable and they will maintain a job. Okay? Let them lose until they're fired and then they can start winning.
Well, I don't think that will be a problem, Voo. Maybe the start winning part will be a problem, but the let them lose part, I think that you got it. No
they had us for like a few hours, you know, and then with that first game or whatever, everyone popping off for EG, but then they just got absolutely ruined. To be honest, I don't know. I don't think this team knows how they win. You know, like they're just playing the maps as they come.
We did it.
Yeah, literally, like that's it. Job complete.
I didn't think past this part.
And then, yeah, exactly. Now what?
Yeah, I didn't realize that was what put EG on like the shit list because I just assumed that was like, I don't know, slightly maybe a little unstable employee justifying their position at the job that they work, you know, like you're trying to come at me for our lack of performance while I'm the performance coach, and well, look at this good result we have.
Look at this performance.
It's not about the praising of the team, it's about praising the fact that she's involved with the team and obviously had an influence on it. Like it's somehow about them, you know. It's nothing to do with how the team actually did. It's just all that hard work, all the things that they did, you know, like meditation balls and, I don't know, yoga, team bonding. It all helped in the end, and they beat the #1 team in the world. Like, give them their props.
This is going to be a mad reach here. Maybe Scriv will know what I'm talking about, but there was a long time ago. There was this, like, ridiculous academy team in League of Legends for the North American scene. I think they were called Ember Esports. And they literally were doing stuff like paying their players, first of all, like 20K, 25K to play like Academy League of Legends and not qualify to the main league, which is like the easiest of the major leagues to qualify into. This is back before franchising and all this shit. And they were also like paying people for meditation practice and like massages, like complimentary massages for their players. And they went on this big tirade about how like within 2 years, because of us, an NA team is going to lift the World Cup or whatever, like the Summoners Cup at the World Championship and win everything. And that's all. Apparently this is the fucking script to read from whenever you're running any NA esports org now. It's just because of like all these ridiculous intangibles that, you know, maybe can actually help you, but you need to get to like within 90% of the way there before these start incrementing anything meaningful. Like, you're not like, this is just ridiculous, man. Like the fact that they have all of the lines that they do have about how they have a pipeline and they made sure to build every single segment of this. And, you know, it's because of all of these decisions and all these like surroundings that this team is doing so well. I mean, the team isn't doing so well. So if you have to, you know, credit to the success, the pipeline initiative, then you clearly have to also credit it with the failures. And that's the thing that these people never think about before they say it. They just spout off and then they don't tweet at all. Or if they do, it's just like,
well, I mean,
this
listen,
result
man,
we're still proud of this event.
Credit they want. They can take whatever credit they want. Just stop fucking criticizing other people in the doing of it. Okay? You can take the credit and be like, yeah, we fucking did it. This was all me, motherfucker. I did this. Okay? You can say that. Fucking go for it. But why does it have to be this whole fucking thing where casters are being mean? They're just saying Heroic didn't show up. By the way, when Heroic did show up, they fucking destroyed us. But they're just saying Heroic didn't show up. It's like they didn't even watch the game. While someone that has no fucking idea about CS, I guarantee. Okay, I don't know for sure, but she oversees performance in every fucking team. So surely she doesn't fucking know a high level understanding of every esport that EG's in, and CS is a pretty intricate game. I would guess she doesn't know that much about fucking CS to even know if Heroic was showing up or not. To be
to my
honest.
knowledge, she's the League of Legends, like more
And can
more
we
into League of
fucking
Legends.
stop
Yeah.
this? One more thing. This is the most tilting thing I hear on a regular basis. This would never fly in sports, in traditional sports.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
football commentator, they wouldn't be able to do that at all. Bro, it's like you've never fucking watched a professional sport. They are way more off the fucking handle than any esports commentator I've seen on a fucking tier 1 broadcast, okay? Those guys, I've heard the phrase goes down as if shot. Get up. Get up. Like, okay, I've heard these phrases live, okay? I've heard people Skip Bayless, okay, exist.
Yeah.
Okay, these people exist. The idea that this doesn't happen in pro sports is only something you would ever say if you've never fucking watched a pro sport fucking game ever. Oh god, it keeps happening. It keeps happening. Every fucking month this happens.
All from NA, of course. All from NA. I mean, maybe there's some like entitled Swedish stuff happening too with NIP, but for the most part, it's all.
Well,
from
I mean,
NA.
Astralis had the whole like our sports psychologist actually is like when Astralis tried to take credit for the GOAT team being the GOAT team, you know?
Yeah, of course.
They had that whole thing.
Riot Games invented esports in 2008 or whatever, and here we
Yeah.
are with Astralis inventing sports psychology in 2013, even though it was again, way past the due date initially. So
Here's the thing with finding out information about some of these other regions as well. Like, NA is obviously going to get the most flack. The UK, to a certain degree, gets the most flack because it's all in English. Like, first off, we talk in English. I read a lot of English. I don't read Swedish or Danish or fucking Serbian or
you
whatever.
Almost
That's
say Denmarky in there.
I don't know what I was going for, to be honest. But I don't speak any of these other languages. There could be a shitstorm brewing there all the time. I just have to hope that some like punter from the scene can then translate it into English for me, the stupid one that can't understand any of this. Or Google can maybe help me out if I ever see this article, but it's more than likely not going to happen.
We don't have the Smuja of Sweden, unfortunately.
Well, I guess it was for a very short time. It was Olaf Meister who was just streaming Valorant, going like, "I'm not going. I have a birthday plan." All right, bro.
Why am I their substitute? They didn't talk to me about this.
So, can anybody clarify? Because I don't even. I should have obviously looked into this, but this is a very professional podcast, so I have to ask. With the whole Olaf Meister being submitted as a substitute thing, I heard that actually it was just Blast automatically renewing what was submitted to Abu Dhabi. And it wasn't actually confirmed by the, like, I guess FaZe would have had to expressly submit something new for it to be changed, but it like automatically sent in their old roster. And that's where people are saying, oh, it's FaZe's fault. But if they then also cleared it, like clearly that whole communication thing where they, for people who don't know, they tried to use config in Blast, then they had to start scrambling at the last minute. And then Blast, who didn't let them use config, mostly because of external pressure from other teams, and then cited the rules saying like, oh, he's contracted to or he's like on another team's sub roster, you can't use him, after initially agreeing that they could use him, then allow them to use Esatag, who's actually contracted on the bench to NIP. So nice, very nice. Like, definitely solved the problem there, guys. Definitely solved it.
And also, I mean, it doesn't have implications on this tournament, I guess, because they used Maxter or whatever, but if config's not going to be totally off limits, then NIP were just like, off limits? That sounds like a great campus. We'll let you have your time. Config, get in here, bro.
Yep.
The whole thing was, it seemed like there was some kind of, from my understanding, internal miscommunication at Blast, which led to like previous substitution rosters just being defaulted, and like teams didn't know about it basically. So like Heroic didn't even know that config was their listed substitute apparently. So
Oh no, I think it was config who didn't know that he was on the roster either. So it was probably both of them were unaware. Yeah,
but they I think wanted to list like NATO Sapphics as their substitute or something like that.
So in order to allow config to go explore other options, they probably had agreed to it prior and just hadn't submitted it, or maybe Blast fucked that up too. I don't know, but I have to say, if somehow config had been able to step in for NIP, I mean, obviously that would have made the FaZe thing even funnier and more ridiculous. But if he had been able to, imagine config versus Astralis, the team that he irresponsibly fucked out of a major appearance. For the most part, like obviously Buzz instead of Farley, but like, Holy shit, man, that would have been something else. Like, just to think about, like, and I guess Device wasn't in there either. So
I will
But it's
wonder if
just
something
incredible.
like this, like a clerical error like this, is also due to the fact that they're probably like busy planning ahead for the major, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
something that a responsibility that they've never had to do. Like I don't think we've had weird substitute errors or anything
No,
like
not
that from
really.
Blast in the past. Like in terms of just the way the administration is run, I feels like they run a pretty tight ship. So this might just be one of those things I was just like, oh well, we'll let the intern handle it, and oh that's not how that's supposed to be handled. Oh no,
Yep.
panic
Yeah.
stations.
Oh, we have to actually read our rule book.
Yeah, well, they probably also need the rule book to be up to scratch for when the major rolls around, I guess, because it's mainly Valve that decides on that kind of thing, but Blast are going to have a bit of a say, so it would make sense. But I am sad we missed the universe where FaZe and Nip play each other and then it's automatically a 4v5. Like, how would that even work? Do they just default the game? Like, I really, I'm sad we don't get that one to play out.
No, dude, it's esports. They would play the game totally fine, and nobody would say anything about a conflict of interest.
Yeah,
Maybe
probably.
Richard Lewis would write another article, and it would be banger content, and then it would still fade away because nobody cares. Seems like.
Sad. Yeah, I'm kind of happy talking about Blast there. I think that's talked around most of the teams. There's still complexity. G2 a little bit, I suppose. G2 look pretty good by all accounts. Huxley still holding them down, but Nico is hitting some pretty hot form, I suppose, moving forwards. They take down Na'Vi, which is no mean feat. So, yeah, any quick thoughts on kind of G2 before we move on? I think it'd be a good time to talk about the top 20 and get that in here.
Oh, it's actually, I can pair the points, which is that it really is silly that G2 were in as Team of the Year candidate or nominee or whatever in that HLTV Awards event, which isn't the top 20, but it's like tangentially linked. And because they definitely, like, this is a good start for them. I mean, it's as good a start as you can get, not dropping a map. Obviously, so 6-0 in maps and 3-0 in series. They're into the event, great. And then we are, it's just a matter of like what happens next with this roster. Obviously, this is an event that maybe most people didn't play for, and if you just frag out, if Nico has one and he was on one in the games that he played, if you look at his stats alone, tell a very different story than what we've seen so far in the end, towards the end of the last year with Nico, where obviously Monacy got the MVP for Abu Dhabi. Yeah, great. I mean, stocks are still rising. I do think this probably sounds weird, and maybe I'm sure some people will think of it as insensitive in light of what was going on at Abu Dhabi. But I do think that Huxley was probably not going to be sticking with this roster. I think Huxley was out. I'm not so sure he's out anymore. Not only did they win an event, now they look pretty good in the first event out of the gate. Obviously, the tragic circumstances surrounding his time at the event of Abu Dhabi, where he lost his father, like apparently right after landing or soon after that, and then decided to stick with the event and just work through it. Really crazy circumstances there, and obviously you have to give him props in the same way that it's reminiscent of Dupree, who had a similar issue at a major, I believe, or at least a big event. So in those circumstances, that's going to define a player's legacy and probably make you think very differently if you are a teammate, where previously, not only are we succeeding where we were utterly failing before, we didn't even make the major, etc. The other thing to think about there is like, okay, well, this has been like he's suffered a great loss, and now we've all sort of worked through that together as a unit. I think it's going to be harder to separate these players now. And so if Huxley doesn't find success with this roster, if this roster doesn't find success with Huxley in the next little bit, it might be harder to make the cut, is sort of what I'm predicting. And so I still don't think he's actually money in the long term, but he has more time to prove everybody wrong. Could be an actual Giga Chad.
Maybe. The Kato is going to be a big one and following into the major. All right, cool. So I really do want to move into the... we'll go with the top 20 first, and then we'll talk about the award show. So I'm assuming most people watching this kind of know where the top 20's at, but we have Simple, Zaiwu, Shiro, Axel, Nico as the top 5. And then we can, just throw in the other names and stuff as we talk about the rest of it. I don't want to go through all 20 and sort of patronize people, but I don't know. I think that this one for me is maybe one of their better looking ones of the year. I think Monacy was maybe a little bit high for me. K-Serato maybe a little bit high as well. But ultimately a pretty good one. I suppose we should just talk about, and maybe these are points that we can bring up and refute and tackle kind of thing. They look at statistics, awards, sample size, consistency, and recency bias. So I think things like Monacy, for example, there's not going to be a lot of recency bias to him, and yet so high. Nico also, pretty high despite the results of last year really not going well. How did we feel about this on first glance? I want to say it's one of the better ones that we've had over the past few years, primarily because we've had more lands to work with, I suppose, as well.
How on earth is James lower rated or lower on this ranking than Spinks?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I think Spinks is only on here because of his first series
The
with
first
Vitality
six,
and his.
I mean, also the
Yeah.
first 6 months of the year, Spinks
Yeah.
world-class player. I think he should be
Yeah.
on the list. He probably should have been number 20.
Yeah.
How is James number 20 when he's the in-game leader and AWPer and MVP of the major that they just won? Over Spinks, who won an ESL Pro League where he wasn't really carrying. It was ZywOo that just farmed. And for the tail end of the year, just wasn't really the player that we expected to see out of Spinks. Since he's left Snappy, Spinks ain't been the same. He's still thinking about him when he goes to sleep.
Must be, yeah. Dreaming of better times. I think the Spinks angle and the Jame angle, you could probably. Well, I don't know if you could swap them, but you could do something like that. You could shuffle them around. This list to me is Jame being only at number 20 feels a bit egregious. I guess they're trying to say that the major was a big result and he had I think it was Rotterdam as a victory, but then obviously they bomb out of Abu Dhabi and they don't really show anything to close the year out. Maybe he would have been higher up if that hadn't happened. The other thing I think too is that when you think about Jame in general, I think everybody agrees pretty much at this point that the IEM Rio Major win was a fluke for that whole roster. I mean, they themselves seem to agree because they cut Norbert immediately. You know what I mean? So they know that roster wouldn't repeat. A lot of it was, fortuitous bracket draws and the other favorites bombing out. And, there was an interesting tidbit where I guess Electronic had said some choice words to, I can't remember if it was Sumdai Young or I think it was Bit. Anyway, he was sort of raging almost after their loss to Furia, and I think that's also not something that's really he's also given the talking to a few players at this very event, this blast event that we just stopped talking about. But the main thing that I have away from the top 20 is just probably the middle is a bit more contentious. Finally, Simple's back on number 1. A little silly that ZywOo was ever over him in at least you can make an argument for one of those years, but not for
Simple was
the
number
other.
1 last year, buddy.
Yeah, well, okay. What I mean is the fact that people were even in this year making the argument. I know these are mostly fans and not analysts saying that ZywOo was number 1 this year is just a little silly to me. I'm glad HLTV didn't go back down that road because to be honest, it felt like they gave ZywOo 2019 because of the fact that or was it 2020? One of them that they gave him was just egregious.
He definitely deserved it. 2020, he no, it's 2020 was contentious. 2019, he 100% deserved it. He should have won it every time.
I can't remember which one I'm thinking of, but there was one where it felt like they gave it to ZywOo almost because they didn't want to keep giving it to Simple, even though he doesn't even really have that many number 1s at that point in time. But it was one of those a lot of esports in particular, and to a lesser degree, the NBA and stuff, have this problem where they refuse to continue to acknowledge greatness year on year if the same player is dominant and give him the most valuable player of the whole league or whatever. And I do feel like Simple was victim to that a few times. At the very least, in one of the particular ones that he lost to ZywOo. Really, I think ZywOo is a number 1 player in 1 year, and that's it. And that's still a great accomplishment, but he's not really been that player the same way. Or maybe you could argue Simple's just elevated another level. I'm not sure. But either way, it's cool that we get so many Titans. To Scripps' point, Nico being so high up, he actually had an interview where he said he doesn't feel like he deserved it. What do you guys think of that?
I had him outside of the top 5.
Yeah.
I know that for sure. I thought he was going to be 6th or 7th, perhaps. Kind of where Monacy is. And I agree, Monacy is probably way too high up this list. First off, rookie year. They didn't do a whole lot. They win one event at the end of the year, and that's great. Yep. Actually, no. They won something at the start of the year as well. Sorry, I'm blanking. But it just didn't feel like he should have been that much higher over somebody like Rops. I thought Rops probably deserved to be in the top 5 over Nico. So.
Yeah,
I
would probably agree with that, especially when you consider the length of time that Rops was playing very well at.
And I'm a Rops hater. I was against. Okay, first off, when tail end of Mal's, Rops was actually just inting that team. So he didn't deserve to have all the flowers thrown at him when he joined FaZe, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, now FaZe is saved." Like what we saw from Mouse is that he sabotages this team actually, perhaps. And this year he played great. Like he was actually an exceptional player, and I can't even hate on that. Like he probably should have won Clutch of the Year as well, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think they were kind of struggling with the idea of like where to put all the FaZe players, because obviously there's 4 out of the 5 FaZe guys, and I think that I don't know if they put Brokey and Rops kind of next to each other any higher. There's some in here where they have to like Brokey, I would say like the clutch factor and the the events that were won and things like that definitely impact on him, whereas Nico and Monacy, it feels like it's more of a numbers question rather than what they've actually won. So again, the top 20, maybe we need to expand it a little bit and start doing like a top 25 or something like that. But obviously they've been doing a top 20 for so many years that I guess they're just going to stick with this kind of format. But ultimately it's fun to look through this and to argue, debate, and say who should have been where and whatnot. I think just because of what was won, I would have put Brokey a bit higher, but then you've got 4 AWPers in the top 5. Things like that might come into their head in terms of where they put these kinds of players, and maybe we need to expand the team that comes into and does the top 20, because I think that's where the awards are different, right? Is that there's a massive panel for that they were doing for like player of the year and whatnot, and then they can ask more people and do more of a general argument with that. But the bottom end definitely felt like it needed some work. The best of the rest, sort of like 7 to 18 or whatever, they all made sense, and I think that they're very interchangeable depending on which criteria you would place as being more important. If you're all about stats, or if you're all about wins, it really depends, because if you're all about stats, maybe Blame F goes higher, and if you're all about wins, maybe Twist goes higher. But I don't know. Certainly can't argue too much. I think they got it. People care about like the top 5 the most. I would have probably not put Nico in there as well. I would have put Munacy a little bit low down, but then you've got like Brokey and Rops knocking on the top 5. So are you then just basing everything off of wins, right? I think there's an argument to be made that Shiro should have been higher. Shiro maybe should have been second over Zywoo.
I actually agree with that. That was something I was kind of chomping at the bit to talk about, because yeah, it's not as clear. Like the top 5 wasn't clear cut to me. I actually struggled a lot with who was gonna come out ahead on that. And this is the thing, like Zywoo has set a standard from previous years that is going to be hard to top. I think Shiro was breaking into a new standard this year. So that's what would have like swayed me to say that he was a secondary or the second best player in the world, is that he's actually seen improvement, I think, this year, as opposed to simply staying the same. Zywoo, we get what we expect. He's a world-class player. He deserves to be in the top 3, fine. But in terms of the actual results, and sometimes his consistency would sometimes taper off at some of these big events, you had to say that Shiro was, I think, going that extra distance more consistently for his team and still not winning anything as well over what Zywoo was offering. Zywoo would sometimes miss out and they would just be like, oh, well, this wasn't a tournament of Vitality, we're going to win anyway, so unlucky. So
yeah, I mean, I think I've got a few takes on the list. I don't think Shiro should have been above Zywoo. I think Pronogo said it. I think it's right that basically people get kind of bored with people like someone being number 1. You kind of like start to write them off, and then the new shiny thing on the block comes by. I can see an argument for Shiro. It's not that I don't think there's an argument. I think Zywoo is just, if you look at events they won, it was basically entirely off the back of Zywoo. Like their Pro League win, what is it? He's got like fucking plus 250 or some shit.
Yeah,
like yeah.
Liquid probably win that if he frags like 10% less, FYI. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, plus 207, 1.42 rate. It's like the events they did win were entirely off the back of Zywoo. This guy is an insane. The only problem with Zywoo that probably keeps him from being oversimple is he like refuses to take over games. I feel like if Zywoo had that like star player mentality to just like take over, he would probably have been number 1. I think he's got the skill to be better than Simple, personally. But the other problems I have with this list, I'd say they changed their mentality of the list. The list feels different. Like if you look at like 2018, 2017 when Simple was number 8. He definitely not number 8 that year. He was far better than number 8.
Yes. Well, Nico had some low placings too around that era
yeah.
as well, if you remember.
If you look at 2016, that's where they put Fallen number 2 and they factored in his IGLing, which they stopped kind of doing at some point, which would be why James is 20 because they don't factor in the IGLing. But it seems like this year they also seem, because last year you could kind of somewhat reliably predict within the top 20 where people are going to be to a reasonable extent, I feel like. This year I feel like it's way more all over the place. Like it seems like they've probably changed a little bit of their mentality with how they rank things. But I'd say I don't know if I have too much of a problem with where Blame F was placed, but I do have a problem with their reasoning. If you read the reasoning for Blame F's placement, let me give you the part that makes no fucking sense. He ranked best in terms of impact on wins, with a kill in 64% of wins and a killer assist in 72%. Rating at big events was good, even though he didn't play many. Maintained a good level. So he was impactful in wins, but his stats are boosted by some margin in losses, as he survived more often in losses than most players in the top 20, and dealt the most damage out of anyone in losses with 63 ADR. That is the most meaningless fucking stat I've ever heard in my life. Of course, a star lurker on a bad team is going to get, spoiler, a lot of fucking damage in rounds lost. Who could have predicted that? Literally fucking anyone. This is literally a stat tailor-made for someone that goes, I don't think Blame F was that impactful. Let me just get you a stat that suggests that I'm right. Let me find one that I think is right. Like it is absolutely meaningless, and they used that to rank Blame F third. It didn't make any. What did they rank him 12th? Yeah, it didn't make any fucking sense. Sure, rank him 12th. It's not that far off. Maybe like I have him in like the 9 to 12 range ish. Like yeah, that's fine. But just like have a better fucking argument for it. It would be great. And then Yakindar 15th also felt a little bit off. Like. Of course, one of their reasonings was that he didn't do as well against better teams when he entered playoffs at events. Of fucking course he didn't. You know, he's like changing. He changed teams. He was on a team that didn't. He was kind of like one man armying a lot of the time. Naturally, that's going to do a lot worse against better fucking opposition. It seems kind of fucking asinine. I don't know. It's some of the reasoning in these like why they ranked here things just didn't really make much fucking sense to me. I also I'd have to look a little bit more at that, but intuitively it felt like Frozen could be a little bit higher, but maybe that's just me.
Well, I mean, the Mouse team mostly lived and died by his impact. Obviously, Dexter also had some crazy showings, especially at the major, or I guess mostly just at the major. Now that I think about it, the major just went on for so long. So really, I think the biggest takeaway is if we're going to go back to Shiro, like the reason why I think it's hard to rank you, like the Blame F reasoning for HLTV is like, oh, he didn't play that many events, but he had good ratings in them. Like that's Shiro and Axel for me both, because just Cloud9 don't fucking play in any of these events, guys. Like if they don't get invited or they don't qualify, they don't play because they're not part of the leagues. So it makes it really hard to evaluate it, like because you're giving such a grander sample size for everybody else that's like at that echelon of play. You know, it's almost surprising that they manage to rank so highly so frequently, considering the lack of sample size, right? So I also think that the Rio Major is a big fat L for those two players. In particular, Axile seemed to just not play very much like himself in the Rio Major. If you guys remember, like Shiro was still popping off.
Yeah, he was trying his heart out.
Yeah, Shiro is still going very ham, but the fact that they didn't make it past Mao's of all teams. I know this is the Gala's major we're talking about, and he literally told them, "Hey, go cheer for Mao's because they have our country's flags on their jerseys or whatever the fucking reasoning it was." But like, okay, whatever. So that maybe the crowd was against them, but we've been waiting for. You guys don't remember this maybe, but like we've been waiting for Gambit / Cloud9 and for Heroic as well to like exit the onliner phase, and I think Heroic have pretty much decimated that narrative now, but. I wouldn't say Cloud9 are onliners. It's just that like the fact that they still haven't found good form in many LAN playoffs, especially back to back. Not even in arena playoffs where they obviously suffer a surprise loss to Liquid, I believe it was in Pro League. So like that's one of those cases where it's like, really, like you guys can't even make, move the needle there. You see somehow defeat FaZe all the time, but you can't seem to do too much else. Maybe it's just a specific matchup against Liquid. Daps was on its server time some time ago saying that he actually thinks that their matchup against Cloud9 is specifically informed by some of the flaws that he didn't elucidate what flaws they were because he wants to keep the competitive advantage. But he said that there's flaws within the C9 camp that seem to go uncorrected for a long time, and those flaws Liquid is like specifically primed to exploit. And that might very well be true. It seems to be true based on their head-to-head. But I also don't know why those flaws and other flaws in the camp aren't being corrected. Like, why is it so long that they haven't been able to string together LAN victories or good deep finishes at LAN events? Like, it's an occasional flash in the pan and then otherwise nothing. So that's really concerning to me. And not sure why they couldn't get past quarters in Rio or why they couldn't get past Liquid in the semis, I believe, at Pro League. And neither of those events are like exactly the same anyway. One's an arena, one of them is not an arena, right? It's just a studio. So you'd think that there would be some comfort there, but Heroic have clearly outstretched them. I also wanted to make the abstract point that it's kind of funny to me that this top 20 is okay for the most part. There's obviously some stupid, as Voo pointed out, but the top 20 is all right. And then like the actual team ranking has just been fucked like the entire last 6 months of 2022. Like the fact that obviously like Mouse was super high up for a while after Rio. We had for a while Astralis was like top 6 or something because of Cologne. And then like there was just a bunch of silly shit like that happening. Obviously Heroic ended the year as the best team in the world according to HLTV, which is just obviously not true. And so like stuff like that is just silly. Outsiders was briefly top 1 just because of the major win, and that completely evaporated. So I just feel like they need to figure something out so that the variance that is intrinsic to the scene doesn't continue to eat away at the credibility of the rankings, because pretty much every analyst disagreed with so many of the placements throughout the entire last 6 months of the year.
Yeah, no, but I think if it's not tied to results, it's just then the rankings have effectively no basis aside from opinionated statistics. Like you would have to try and infer from the ways that they won which team was the like. I actually don't hate the way that they do the rankings purely because of the fact that it is based in objective results. Like there's something that you can tangibly look at and go like, oh, this is the reason why, as opposed to it being a bit more like we can have our differing opinions. We can have a little controversy as to are they actually the top one team in the world? Probably not. But like you need to have something based in some kind of hardline fact where they won these big events, so therefore they are the number 1 team for now. It may not last very long, but for now, this is what we have to deal with.
I don't know if you need that. I mean, like,
here's
it's like a reference point.
The problem is that the HLTV ranking isn't really a ranking. It's like it's not a ranking for the future. It's a ranking for the past. I guess is the way to put it. It's like people use it to be like, this is the number 1 team, but a lot of the time it's just kind of like a certain. This happens a decent amount, and we always have these fucking discussions when this happens, where like a team kind of like they won a couple things, they did okay, they were never really the best team, but the old best team just stopped winning, and so they just kind of dropped off, and all of a sudden they're number 1, but nobody really thought they were number 1. That's just because of the way the ranking works, right? That's just it's not really that Heroic is probably the number 1 team. They were just like the most consistent team in an era of like inconsistency, I guess. I feel like though you don't necessarily need it to be based on stats. Like you could have rankings, and you could have like fucking Thorin's ranking, Pimp's ranking, and Maniac's ranking. You could have the 3 rankings and compare them to each other. And I feel like when I remember Thorin's ranking, it was more of like a how good are they going to be ranking. I feel like it was a little bit more consistent in that regard. But I guess you could, in my argument would be that people just misuse the HLTV ranking. It's not necessarily meant to mean what people take it to mean.
Well, that's my big like why I'm in a bunch about that, because I'm looking at the ranking and I'm seeing people say, "Oh, Heroic is the best team," and it's like, well, not really, because they just happen to get enough points. I mean, this isn't exactly related to why Heroic were number 1, but you guys do have to remember that these blast groups are basically HLTV farming simulator, because you just farm all these points from all these matches endlessly back and forth, trading all of these points, and not even that, but also if there's ever an upset, like the amount of impact it has on the team that gets the upset. We saw Complexity shoot up massively after upsetting Navi in I think a best of 1, or might have been a best of 3 when they had Headtrick standing in last year. And even today, or in the modern day, we obviously had EG defeat Heroic earlier in this past Blast event. That's another case where they're going to get an inflated ranking, or maybe their ranking currently was deflated. You could argue because like 200th in the world is probably not true, but maybe not like it, probably top 50 or something. I don't know, like not very good, obviously. But like whatever the case may be, when you look at the ranking, there's clearly some fuckery afoot. It's clearly gamed to some degree by the tournaments, by the teams, by the agreements, and it's also clearly really hard to get an actual good sort of frame of reference for how good teams really are past maybe the top 5. And even then you have to think like maybe top 2, top 3, top 4, whatever that pairing is, are kind of interchangeable to some degree depending on the scene or depending on the era. But once you get past that, it's like so many teams can beat each other. So is this really an effective way to break it down? I do think that Thorin's were a lot more consistent with reality usually, and maybe he'll do it again. I don't know.
I think the major issue that people have is that the HLTV rankings are actually used for invites for tournaments, unfortunately.
Right.
Because a lot of TOs don't look at, the subjectivity of it and actually want to get sort of the top quality teams. And also they sometimes don't have the reach to get a FaZe or a Liquid or someone to attend their tournaments. So they go, oh, this team's in the top 30. Yeah, let's invite them instead. And that's just how some of these smaller tournament operators work. And that inherently will inflate their rankings even more. The fact that they're probably one of the better teams at one of these events that will also contribute to their rankings again. It's all very circular that, it contributes to itself. So it's a strange system in that regard because it can be gamed, but I just think it is tied to in some truth of how the scene is. Like there's a lot of tournaments going on. If you're winning them, you get more points. If you're losing them, you're not getting as many points. So that's you have to use it as a reference.
Yes, you have to interpret it differently than most people actually use it, and that's probably the biggest issue where there's a huge amount of disconnect. And I also think, to be fair, it's like way too late to change this now. Like HLTV is such a staple. Everybody goes there. Nobody really uses any other website in mass droves for any sort of statistical analysis. HLTV just fucking reposts other people's articles and like lazily translate it and like sort of puts a tiny link somewhere else. And okay, like so they've got not really a monopoly, but they've got like the lion's share of attention when it comes to stats, especially news. It's
I say they do have a
sort of
monopoly.
breakdowns.
I think it's pretty accurate. Yeah.
I mean, people are looking at some other events. I mean, obviously, like there's a lot of time for Deserto articles by Louis Mira or Richard Lewis, and there's obviously going to be a lot of other cases like that where you go specifically like this play.gg is trying to fill the void of Jackson, it looks like, or whatever. Maybe some other stuff like eScore News, which is like I don't even know why that's a real thing, but they're a website out there and they do a lot of translations of stuff that like people at HLTV isn't going to do. So yeah, and maybe that's even more like that might even be more of like a gossip mag or something than a vertical of actual news too, because that's where I got the info about like Electronic chewing out I believe it was Bit at the end of their run at the Rio Major.
And
it's
you're
like
into the online tabloids.
Yes, this is a tabloid paper. Of course, only it's the ultimate tabloid because it's a tabloid post that gets uploaded on Reddit, and that's how I find it. So there you go. This tabloid within tabloid. But enough about me wasting my time. I think that's pretty much I don't know if you guys have any other points in the top 20. What do you think, Scriv? Anything to close us out here? Or HLTV as a whole?
I mean, not too much to add. I think maybe we wanted to touch on the award show as well, just sort of as our closing kind of concept. First year they've done this, at least in person. I think that for me, I think it went down pretty well. I'm relatively happy with the way that it looked as a concept. It was a little. The idea is there. It's small at the moment. They need to work on kind of marrying everything up so it looks super smooth. But that's we watched a bit of it, didn't we? To be fair, Prinogo, like that's being super nitpicky with where it's at. But I think as a concept, it's really solid. And then this, I feel you kind of have to prefer the system of a panel of peers voted on, and we can hear from a few of them throughout the night and things like that. It's a HLTV confirmed also kind of live. It's got everything that HLTV on their extracurricular is really liking. But ultimately, I'm I feel happy with the concept. Maybe if we just do a quick touch on, where you guys feel the concept of an award show. Did they pull it off well? Did everyone watch it the whole way through? I don't know that everyone watched. It's kind of like the Oscars where, you just find out afterwards who won what, and maybe, you see the odd meme like Snacks's very funny hijacking of the show for 2 minutes. But for me, I think the concept's really cool. Where do you guys stand on a yearly award show?
If anyone was gonna run it in the scene, I like that HLTV has run it. I always feel like when we do award shows in the the grand esports space, it's all just about which fandom actually turns out and votes the most, and sometimes the panel are gonna be more skewed to one game over the other game, and it does feel a bit harder for CS to ever really get a limelight. So I'm glad we do one of our own. I think it was of a very good quality. I didn't watch much of it. I tuned in where I could because I was traveling at the time.
Yep.
And it was, it was well presented. I think the problem that they're gonna have, I think, is the issue of longevity. Like if they're gonna set this as a thing they want to do recurring year after year, getting consistent sponsors to do it. I know 1xBet were a big one for this. And also, if the top 5 is as easy to predict, with the remaining players that we had in circulation, with how they sort of led up into it, it is going to be I think a hard sell to continue viewership for, if that makes sense. Because I almost felt like they were revealing the top 3, or was it the top 4 or something? At the
top 3 of each category, you mean?
No, but like at the top of their players of the year, they were.
Oh
their
I
last,
think they did
their last 3 at the event.
I think they did
right?
the top 3, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like those 3 fairly obvious. Maybe 1 or 2 of them was interchangeable, but that doesn't really matter because it's the same 3 players. So, if they have circumstances like that recurring year after year, it's going to be, I think, harder for them to sort of maintain viewership. But I thought for a first-time show, the production quality was fairly high, and it looked great. And also just the optics of having like loads of really, really successful veterans of the scene come into the award show. Some of them getting old medals, stuff like that. Like that's cool, man. Like I love the fact that we had like this congregation of loads of different personalities and players. So it's a really cool concept. I just hope that it can keep up, because I don't know if this is true, but I would imagine, flew out a bunch of the players as well off their own money to make sure that they made it to the award show, because otherwise they would have to get the players to somehow fund themselves to do that. And that's a harder sell. So
did you watch it at all, Voo?
Not even for a second.
There it is.
Any issue with it as like an idea?
As a concept, yeah. I think the biggest
I just
point...
didn't really care,
There it is.
basically.
I mean, fair enough. I can't argue with that.
As a concept, right? Like what Yumi said about, like, I think the biggest contrast is probably the esports awards. And it's like, yeah, CS is big enough and has enough stuff going on and has enough people paying attention to it. We can definitely get a yearly award show. Probably the only issue is that, just like everything else, like certain people are on a block list or whatever, a blacklist, I should say, of, just like you're not going to see... Almost certainly you're not going to see like a Thorin, or even probably a Richard Lewis, or somebody who's like endemic to the space, but is, not just going to... Basically will call people on their bullshit if bullshit exists, and HLTV has some bullshit, right? So if there's a situation like that, the politics of that scene probably mean that some of the sort of longer standing community members who do have something to say and are going to make something happen historically, or maybe you could argue deserve a spot to like be an analyst at this place or be one on the panel or whatever, there's probably going to be a situation like that come up where like you're just not going to see those people. But if you don't mind that, and I don't think many people do in the grand scheme of things, right? As a show in a vacuum, makes a lot of sense. Looked pretty good. I didn't watch much of it either, so I can't really say that like everything made the most sense. And obviously, I did take some issue with like G2 on Team of the Year nominee. Like obviously not. Heroic probably should have been on there. And then obviously beyond that, it's like maybe some of the results end up being really obvious, like the simple cases or even the phase case for Team of the Year. It's like they probably wanted to make it seem like it was more in doubt and then announce it, right? And I think maybe that's probably taking a cue from the Oscars or whatever. That's what Scrib referenced earlier. It's like, yeah, sure, the Golden Globes and what have you, like we announce it and it's kind of tense, and who is it? But there was none of that tension here. We just knew what that was. So for the most part, I mean, the results were sensible, the votes were sensible. Cool that it's a panel. Cool that it's focused to CS. Probably some things were silly, not just the nominees, but also like Clutch of the Year, I think went to the wrong person. I can't remember even who it was. I just remember it wasn't the right one. So
Monacy.
that's all I need.
Yeah, Monacy won Clutch of the Year with his 1v4 against MIBR in an online game
That's
had,
why I was really
yeah.
just like 100% knew this was stupid.
Albeit context is he was in like single digit officials on G2.
Yeah.
You know, like this was very early in
Whatever.
his professional career.
Yeah.
It is
you notice how instantly less sexy it is that you have to shade in a bunch of context for why the Clutch was Clutch of the Year.
But also
you know
like the mechanics are fucking fantastic. Like you read the situation perfectly. It is a cool clutch. But Clutch of the Year when you have a winning moment from Rops in a hold from short that has great movement, great crosshair placement, spatial awareness, and it's in winning factor for the team. Like it's just the two don't compare from like if you're gonna rely on context, if you're gonna rely on like the mechanics of it, Rops had just as much mechanics, just wasn't using a fucking AWP. Like
and I mean I would even say I don't know if you can really, it's not Clutch, it would probably be Play of the Year. I don't even remember if they did that, but like obviously the Canada thing has to be in there, right? It's like the twists jumping off and breaking Navi in Cologne. It's like that's what allowed them to win that series, plain and simple. I mean maybe they would have won it some other way, but that's certainly the finishing move, so to speak. So definitely could have been better selections in a lot of cases, and it's just like why did they do some of the things that they did? What are these decisions? So yeah, definitely some silliness.
Also, the thing that they tried to like
no, back up. This Rops thing, it's not even a it's a highlight. Okay, I thought it said Clutch of the Year.
Well, it's highlight of the year,
yeah.
It's this isn't shit compared to the Monesi one. What are you talking about?
Here we go.
Hold on,
we're looking
secret
at the HLTV voter
we're
here.
looking at the Brokey one now. Brokey.
Nah, fuck the Brokey one. It wasn't even that good.
Brokey versus Stralis. The Brokey one. The Rops one is cool, but listen, you're tilting me because this is the same fucking thing as like all this fucking Katie Clutch because he won.
It is nowhere near.
He won Pro League with it. They won Pro League. It was the winning moment. Okay, that was like, this is the fucking part. Listen, the Rops thing is cool. If this is the best highlight we have for a full year, CS is fucking dead. Okay, this was like,
why didn't they put the Brokey stuff in?
This was like nice movement, like good awareness, like okay aim. It was like there's nothing fantastical about this clutch. It's just like solid. It's just solid. It's like the Rain 1v5 on Cash, where like they all walk into him and it was good game sense and good movement and he didn't miss a shot, but it was like there was nothing, he didn't break the fucking mold of the game to make this clutch.
I'm still confused why the Brokey versus Navi in the grand finals of the major on Inferno wasn't on there. That to me was a banger. Like the fact that he manages to switch from op to Tech 9 to like suddenly clothesline a bunch of players rushing him.
Clutch again.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
Go watch your online game.
I think it might be.
Go watch your online.
Is it from his very first game? I swear I heard them mention.
Yeah, it's probably one of his. I think it was his debut at that point or something.
Yeah,
at least on
definitively.
That's y'all are on fucking
crack. I don't know.
Y'all are on fucking crack.
He's using the noob gun, man. I can't.
You can't even argue. The fact
dude,
that
he's using the gun before it even gets nerfed. Dude, he's obviously cheating.
It's not his debut.
He ignores the guy Newbox because he knows that he can't peek on that. Oh yeah, this is good. This is good gameplay. This is one where he breaks the mold. This is one where like he actually makes something happen that shouldn't be happening. The Rops one, yeah, maybe he shouldn't get 4 kills, but it's not like they're in really bad positions to prevent him from getting 4 kills. Y'all are high. Y'all are
what they have 3 players that can crunch him at any moment, and he picks and selects each correct fight, and he rails.
Yeah, that was like, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a good clutch, okay, but it's not like game breaking stuff, which is what you expect from a highlight of the year. Come on, highlight of the year, bro. Highlight of the year, bro.
Is it not like harder to do with a rifle than an AWP though? I think that's the point that Michael's.
No, I'd say it's. I mean, arguably, it's harder to do with an AWP because you're
between each shot, you're bolting as well. Like there's like downtime in between each shot. Like I'm not saying the Monacy clutch isn't sick, and I think it is a marginal victory that I would give to Rops because of the context. But they're also going to factor in context for Monacy's one because it's that much more sick that he's a rookie player and that it's like his first few games.
arguably they might not factor in context that much in terms of like just that it's a highlight. Like when I'm thinking highlight of the year, if I'm thinking clutch of the year and Rops was 1v4, then I might be thinking about that because the context matters a lot. If I'm thinking highlight of the year, I'm purely thinking how high was this light? Like, you know, like how much of a fucking how high was the light, man? It was high, okay? It was like, how cool was this? How sick was this play? You know, like this is a sick play. This is a highlight. The Robs one is more of a clutch than a highlight. Like, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
it's
no, I get
really
you.
fucking cool. It's great when you factor in the context, but purely as a highlight, like frag movie. I'm thinking frag movie potential. The Munesi one has way more frag movie.
I think where I'll concede is that probably because it was at the start of the year as well. Like it's very easy for like that was like what coming up on 12 months ago now that this Modesty highlight came out.
Yeah.
Like it was at the very start of the year.
February
So
6th.
it can be quite easy to also sort of lose the spark because I've seen it so many times now already. You know, it's run through repetitions in my mind. I know how the like when you're saying, "Oh, let's pull this Modesty clutch up again," like I know exactly what happens in it because I've watched it so many times.
This is
So it could be
the Munesi
it's like
clutch was everything
desensitization.
the Canadian clutch wishes it was, except for the winning pro league.
I know, and
moment,
against
bro.
MIBR, yeah, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fucking let's be honest. Gambit played that clutch worse than MIBR played that fucking clutch.
Yeah.
I can't
Canadian
find
clutch
the
was
clip
shit.
that I
I
was
just
looking
had to
for,
work
but-
that in. Any
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
podcast.
No,
in,
no, I
gotta
mean,
work
Yeah,
on.
that's-
well, of course.
Yeah,
we need
MIBR
people
played
to
it.
not forget.
MIBR played it just about as badly as Liquid did against Refresh. So
That's some fucking cap. That's some cap. Hard capping. You're capping your ass off right now, buddy. All right, that's fucking cap. Stack of caps right there, buddy. MIBR played it okay. I can't remember how well they played it. It's hard to tell from the fucking HUD off highlight version. I feel like I remember they played it okay. The guy Newbox can't really peek. And he has his pistol out. He doesn't have time to reload because Munesi could push him. I think they played it okay. I think they played it fine. The Refresh one was exceptional. Liquid could not have played that any worse.
Love that.
yeah, let's just jump through smokes. Yeah, what's the worst that could happen?
That one was truly troll. And then at the end in the 2v1, it looked like they were both expecting the other player to make the play. Oh yeah, this Brokey highlight is sick though.
Come on, bro.
It's 3K.
It was against Nip,
that's
not Navi.
That's not. Oh, okay, but that's not like the. That's not the one that got it. I mean, this one you could argue could be up there. The fucking. Brokey
Yeah, the quick Tech
versus
9
NIP,
flicks
yeah.
between, especially.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. If somebody asks me about a highlight from last year, that's what I'm thinking. So, but
Yeah.
whatever. People want to put out online games instead of like major playoffs.
We'll get there. We're past
get there.
we're past COVID, hopefully, and you know should be
Guys stuck
sorted
over
this
last
time
week,
next year.
bro.
Oh, that's
We're
true,
not
actually. Yeah, but you know we don't have to lock down anymore. We just sort of like let people get vaccinated, hopefully.
This Brokey one versus Astralis is definitely not third, bro. This is way better than the Rops one. What the fuck? Bro,
Listen,
what is
Striv.
going on?
Hmm.
Hold on, can
You're-
we talk about that KD in 1v5? That KD in 1v5. listen, I want a new
we
rule.
not?
I want a new
Not
rule for
again.
like epic clutches. I want a new rule for epic clutches. If the first, oh my god, they open and close the door like 4 times. This Brokey should have won, man. This Brokey one was way better.
It's so
What
silly.
the
I don't know.
fuck?
It's just like silly.
I know, but
It's
it's
just
like this is
goofy.
a highlight. The Rops one is just it doesn't scream highlight to me. It's like boring frag movie like filler content. Like it's nice, it's good game sense, but it's boring. Okay, anyways, the KD in 1v5, there needs to be a new rule. Okay, new rule. If in a 1vx you get the first kill less than a second after your last teammate died, it's 1vx -1. Okay, so if it's a 1v5 and you get the first kill
As a trade,
0.1
right?
second after your
Yeah.
teammate died, that's not a 1v5. That's a trade kill. It's a 1v4. Okay,
Yep.
that's all.
I can
saying.
agree with that. I can agree
It's
with
like
that.
it just annoys me because I see this a lot with 1v2s where it's actually a 2v2 and the first guy dies and then you trade and there's like 1v2 sick and it's like no, that was a 2v. You ignore the entire context of the round to call this a 1v2. It's a 2v2, okay? And the only reason you got that kill is anyways, okay. Yeah, sorry I had to shit talk Katie and again, you know.
every
Move on.
time, you know, it's gotta happen. It's gotta happen. To be fair,
Gotta complain.
Yeah, well, rightfully so. I mean, you know, it was a pretty overhyped one back in the day.
He got
Can't let
two
people
kills off the
forget.
death of his teammate. He got 2 kills off the death of his teammate. It was really a 1v3.
There it is.
All right, the
See?
Cadian 1v3 that will never be forgot.
Well, listen, Scriv, you're talking about. Well, actually, it was Voo who talked about complaining, but I'm addressing you now. You talked about complaining. There's going to be plenty of time for complaining in the next episode because we still haven't gotten to Hunden. And my time is up.
Yeah, that's true. I know you've got to go. I think that'll do us for this one. Maybe we'll whack out the Hunden episode a little bit sooner, but I'm sure.
Let's get him on. He's a part of the fucking community now, bro. Let's get him on.
Well, all revealed 60 minutes with Hunden, maybe. Nonetheless, though, thank you very much for watching, everybody. And once again, if you've joined us live, thank you so much. We do have everything in audio format now as it all gets uploaded. Make sure you check in with the next one. All our Twitters and everything will be in the description, so that you can catch the next one nice and live and get the little bit of preamble beforehand, where all the banter goes down. Nonetheless, that is going to be it for this one. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you again next week. All right.
You're gonna love this video right here. You're gonna love it. Check it out right now.